Hello and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast. Today, my guest is Kam Knight, who is a coach, an international speaker, and a best-selling author of over a dozen books. Most of his books have to do with personal mastery and mental performance. And today we talk about overcoming internal resistance. And what I love about this topic is there's not one person that's not going to be able to relate to this internal resistance. So we talk about what it is, the root cause of it, and how to move past it and how to overcome it. And what is internal resistance? It's when we want to do something, we know how to do it, we have the motivation to do it, and for some reason it just doesn't get done. So how do we move past this? I am so excited to share this episode with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're enjoying these episodes, please give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. And even more gratitude if you can leave a comment or leave a review. But again, thank you for being here, and I hope you'll enjoy today's episode. Hello, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast, a place to explore possibility through mindfulness, movement, and self-discovery. Our intention is to deliver insight and inspiration while fostering conversations that are genuine, unfiltered, and deeply human. We hope you will enjoy today's episode. Hi, Kam. Good morning, and welcome to the Connected Community Podcast.
Thank you very much, Nikki. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. I am excited to have you because today we're going to be talking about internal resistance, what that is, and how to move past it. And one of the things that struck me, that I think every single person that listens to this will be able to relate to, is that you had said, this relates to when I want to do something, I know what I want to do, I know how to do it, I have the motivation to do it, and then for some reason I get stuck and I can't do it. And I don't think that there's a single person that wouldn't be able to relate to that.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, I talk about a really interesting concept, and it came about because my whole life I was a fairly driven individual. And what I tell people is that it's kind of hard not to be driven and living in a culture and society that we are, where everyone's always telling us to do more and be our best selves and reach for the stars. And although I've had my fair share of success, I feel like I really missed the mark, or the success was much more difficult and much more stressful than it needed to be. And I always wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something, like I know what to do and I know how to do it and I have the
Mm-hmm.
motivation to do it, but for one reason or another, I'm not doing it? And at the time, there were no clear answers. When I went out on my search to figure out why, the best answers I heard was, oh, you have limiting beliefs or you need discipline. And those are part of the equation, but I
Mm-hmm.
always thought there was more to it. And the more books I read, more coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human brain. And over time, I started to realize, hey, wait a minute, there's a part of our mind built to keep us from growing and making progress. There's actually a part of our brain, and it's hard to imagine, that's whose specific function is to hold us back. And I call this part resistance. It's this brick wall that we hit anytime we want to do something, but we can't, no matter
Yeah.
how much we want to do it.
Yeah. Yes. And this is something every person can relate to on a small and a big scale, right? I'm thinking about when I'm in grad school, and there are some people that as soon as the assignment was given, that everyone was on it and they were on task and they were kind of doing a little bit each week until that assignment was due. And then there are other people that like scramble, and then 3 nights before they're pulling all-nighters and they're going to
Correct.
the end. And do we tend to have one pattern or the other, or does it depend on what the thing is that we're trying to conquer?
Yeah, I think how resistance manifests, it's actually different for different people.
Mhm.
And what I tell people is that when resistance wants to stop us, it doesn't tell us that it's going to stop us. It doesn't say that. It has a lot of manipulative tricks, and we can kind of talk about some of the tricks. And so when it starts to show up, it shows up differently for different people,
Mhm.
but it shows up in a way where it tries to stop us the most. The brain will kind of remove any sort of motivation and drive prior to the last minute. And so they just don't have any motivation to do the thing. It's like they know they should be doing it. They know they should start now because it'll be easier to get it
Yeah.
done, but for some reason they can't get themselves to do it. And they'll fall into avoidance patterns. So they might just find themselves playing a lot more video games than normal, watching a lot more Netflix shows than normal, or hanging out with friends than normal. And then before you know it, it's a few days before their exam. And the only reason they even get motivated to start doing it is because the defense mechanism kicks in and it's like, all right, we need to buckle up because now it's time to get things done. So that's why they get motivation at the very last minute. But this
Mhm.
is just one of the patterns. There's so much more going on when it comes to resistance.
Yeah, so let's talk about what other patterns come up.
Yeah. One of the biggest ways resistance shows up is we'll say, I'll do it later. Several years ago, I heard a woman speak in South Africa about her journey of addiction.
Mhm.
And she described a pattern that she fell into that many addicts fall into. She said many addicts know what they're doing is wrong. When they're searching for the next hit, a part of them knows that they should stop, though there's a sneaky little trick that keeps them from stopping. And that trick is, I'll do it later. They say, I'll do it later, or I'll do it next time. So when they're searching for the next hit and their brain is going, we should stop, they're saying, after the next hit, we'll stop. After the next one, we'll stop. We just need to do it one more time, but after, we'll stop.
Mhm.
And when they say it, they're convinced that after the next one, they'll stop. Absolutely convinced. In their mind, they truly believe after the next hit, they'll stop. And I bring this up because all of us are doing this in some area of our life.
Yeah.
A want or desire comes up. And in that moment, we say, we'll do it later. We'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it this weekend. We'll do it next week. We'll do it next month. Or we'll do it next time. And when the later or next arrives, we push it off to the next and next and next until one of two things happens. One, either we get married, have two kids, a stressful job, and as a result, no more time, or we completely forget the goal. And so if a person finds themselves saying later or next time, it's really important for them to know that it might not be later or next time. And it's
Mhm.
just a deceptive trick that their brain is playing to keep them from doing that thing that they're trying to have them avoid.
Mhm.
And a good way to know if it is a trick is if you'd really do it later or next time. And if you don't, it was just a trick.
Mhm.
And so this is one of the biggest patterns that people fall into. But there's other patterns too, like sometimes we'll make up excuses. And to understand what I mean, Nikki, have you ever given someone a suggestion or advice, and before you could finish, they started throwing up all sorts of excuses of why it can't work, won't work, or
Mhm.
won't work
Yeah.
for them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the simplest way our brain stops forward progress. It'll throw up all sorts of excuses into our awareness, like I don't have time, I don't have energy, I have this condition. And what's really interesting is when the excuses come up, just like with when we say later or next time, we think we're the one saying it. Like because the voices are in our head,
Yeah.
we assume we're the one that came to the conclusion or the one that decided that. But the reality is, it's a voice of resistance. And our resistance can go to great lengths to come up with excuses. It'll say things like, well, I don't want to do that because it goes against my beliefs. I don't want to support that and all sorts of things. And most of the time, it's just a load of BS. And the reason I say that is because most of us are doing things that go against our beliefs in some way.
Mhm.
But when there's no resistance, it doesn't become an issue. It only comes up when there's resistance. So it's a lot of the excuses that we're creating in our heads. It's really just the brain trying to like slow our progress.
Mhm.
And in these situations, it really helps to not fight or resist the excuse, just let the excuses come up and run their course. And when they have, look at the situation logically and see if the excuse is actually valid or just how valid it is.
Mhm. But I imagine if you're in that situation that you're gonna find a way to validate your excuse.
Right. But if you can understand that a lot of those excuses really isn't you, but it's just a
Mhm.
part of you trying to hold you back,
Yeah.
then we can kind of take a step back and try to look at the excuse as in a more logical or rational light and see just how valid it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about this, I've been thinking about my own procrastination on things, and I can think of two things that just stand out immediately. And one is in June, we went on a big trip to South Africa, and I've been wanting to make this book for
Yeah,
myself and my mom on one of those websites where you kind of load in all your pictures. And it took me until last week to finally get on that.
yeah,
And I've been trying to hounding myself this whole time, and I'm finally getting it done because I want to get it done before the end of the year. Um, and another one is I was intermittent fasting and I was doing a really good job. And then I've fallen off the wagon. And every night I'm like, tomorrow morning I'm going to intermittent fast. And then even this morning I'm like, I'm hungry. I'm going to have some cereal. And
yeah,
I'm having trouble getting back onto that pattern. And I know like once you start a new pattern, it takes like 30 days for your body and your brain to adjust, and it kind of becomes normal. And I'm having trouble getting back into that cycling. So what advice would you have for me? Because those are two one's like a procrastination thing, and then one's like I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to do it tomorrow, and I'm not
yeah.
doing it tomorrow.
Yeah, so it's good that you've caught the pattern.
Hmm.
And so when you do hear yourself say, I'm going to do it tomorrow, you're going to have to say, hey, Nikki, you've been saying I'll do it tomorrow, I'll be do it tomorrow, but it hasn't happened. So this is just a trick that you're playing on me to keep me stuck in this cycle of not getting back on the fasting.
Hmm.
And so in this instance, you just kind of have to like buckle down and just do it and not listen to that voice that is in your head. And the other one that you were saying, you kind of procrastinated to the last minute. Well, it really helps to understand why that happens. And it really comes down to challenges that we experience early on in our life, such as trauma or people always scolding us for mistakes. And more or less, it comes down to the pain of mistake. And the more a person feels the sting of mistakes, the more resistance they will have. Since making mistakes creates this unpleasant feeling, their brain is going to try to prevent them from making mistakes. And so they'll keep them from doing anything until absolutely necessary. And so this
Hmm.
is why that kind of procrastination comes up. I suspect there is this feeling like it needs to be done right, it has to be done well. And if it's not, your brain might release unpleasant feelings like you can't do anything right. And again, these things come not because we're doing it to ourselves, but as we're growing up, our brain picks up these kind of thinking from other people and it takes over and essentially kind of recreates how people treated us by doing the same thing to ourselves.
Hmm.
And so again, because this resistance is coming up out of a fear of a mistake, we kind of have to tell our brain that it's okay if we make a mistake. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just getting started, it's going to be okay. And once we do get started and we find that it's not as hard as we think it's going to be, the brain's not going to create as much resistance to it.
Hmm. What are some of the other things? Because the making a mistake thing doesn't resonate in this circumstance where I'm creating this book and it's going to be beautiful, and it's not necessarily like a mistake that I would make. So what are some of the other thoughts that
Oh,
might get into our way?
well, yeah. Okay. So, one of the biggest causes of resistance actually has to do with self image.
Hmm.
So, many people have created a self image that they're studious, they're intelligent, they're tech savvy, or they're this great artist, comedian,
Hmm.
or they have this great story. But they'll avoid studying, applying themselves, or putting themselves out there because if things don't go well, they have to face the fact they're not this great self image they created for themselves.
Mm.
And it's easier not to do the thing and hold on to the self image than to actually do it and face the possibility that it might that we might do it wrong. And so for the brain, it's like really a survival thing. Like it feels that if the self image is damaged, it can really affect our ability to survive. Because a lot of our patterns were built back in the hunter gatherer and primitive days, and still running that program. Because back then there was only so many self image that could fit within a group or tribe, and if you didn't fit within it, then you were ostracized. So
Mm.
these are some of the deeper things that are going on that can hold us back. And
Yeah.
it may not resonate like consciously, but as we know, much of our unconscious is hidden, which is why we call it the unconscious.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of these patterns going on unconsciously that are driving our day-to-day decisions and actions. And so just because something doesn't fully resonate doesn't mean, or especially right now, doesn't mean it's not kind of working in the background to keep you procrastinating.
Yeah. So how do we deep dive to figure out these unconscious patterns?
That's the challenge thing. It's how do we kind of break through
Mhm.
and see what's going on inside of us. I think one really cool technique is self-talk.
Mm.
We can actually use self-talk to kind of understand what's going on in our subconscious. And one way to do that is kind of create a statement of what we want or the outcome that we desire.
Mhm.
So let's say that a person wants to become healthy and fit, or a person wants to become more confident and assertive.
Mhm.
So they would create a statement or several statements like, I am strong and confident. I easily communicate my needs and wants.
Mhm.
And they would repeat that statement in their head and notice what comes up as they repeat it. So
Mhm.
if the
Mhm.
brain starts retorting like, that will never happen, you're a
Yeah.
loser, you're an idiot, well, that's a telltale sign of what you have going on in your unconscious.
Mhm.
And the more you do it, the more data you're going to get. You're going to get why your brain doesn't want to do this thing, why it feels like, um, um, why it's saying the things it is. And the more you say, you'll start actually getting memories of times from your past of when somebody made fun of you or a parent said that you can't do anything right. And so you'll really start to get a lot of information as to what's going on for you unconsciously that is driving a person's decision and actions right here and now.
Yeah. Yeah. So most of these patterns are developed in our childhood, is that right?
Most of it, I mean, the psychology and science say by about 6 or 7 years old,
Mm.
our brain has kind of formulated an opinion of who we are, what we can expect from others and from the world, and our place in it. More or less, a lot of the stuff that happens after, we react and respond to it based on how we were treated and how available people were to our needs at prior to 7 and 6 years old.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So then it's something unconscious, and I imagine it's not that easy to identify, and then it's not that easy to break.
So I do want to say one thing: change is hard. It's
Yeah.
not as easy as we think it is, and it's not as easy as a lot of these personal development coaches and gurus and experts make it seem. And what's interesting is, when we get the feelings of inspiration and motivation,
Mhm.
those feelings can make it seem like it's going to be easy. It's like, oh, yeah, I can do this. But once those feelings fade, we're back to our old selves
Mhm.
and, the old ways that we had, and they're going to put up a lot of fight and resistance to go after things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want people to understand it's not as easy as people make it out to be. So
Yeah.
long story short, it is much harder, but it's not as hard as it needs to be. Because if we can
Yeah.
come in prepared, knowing that there's a part of our brain that's going to put up a fight, it's going to create resistance, and there's going to be different ways that resistance is going to show up, we can be more prepared to to to
Mm.
enter that battle. It's where people struggle is where they think it's going to be easy, and then they face resistance, and they go into a lot of beat up of like, I can't do this, I'm not cut
Yeah.
out, and all of that. Now, to
Yeah.
answer your question about identifying it, it is kind of challenging because the human brain is so complex.
Mm.
I think one of a famous physicist, I can't recall his name right now, he says it's essentially the most complex structure in the known universe, more complex than
Mm.
stars and planets. And in many ways, I do believe that. And so there's a lot of reasons for resistance. And in some of these things, like it's not intuitive, you really wouldn't know. But at the same time, we don't necessarily need to know why we're being held back. We
Mhm.
just need to know that there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. and it's going to manifest in a lot of tricky behaviors. And I mentioned two of them, but there's going to be a lot more. And so if
Mhm.
a person can understand that anything that's keeping them from their goal or aspirations is essentially a trick, they can be a lot more prepared to weave through the challenges and roadblocks our own mind will throw at us when we try to go after something.
Yeah. But from what I'm hearing you say is if we can identify what that trick is, and then if we can kind of go backwards and then identify the root cause of it and what's happening in our unconscious mind, which isn't that easy, but it's doable, then we're breaking a pattern versus pushing through resistance. Like, oh, I've got
Right.
to get that paper and now I've procrastinated and it's due and I'm going to push through and get it done. And if you continue to do that, you might be getting things done, but you're not going back to the root cause and breaking the pattern.
Yeah, exactly. When we're dealing with resistance, I think one of the worst things a person can do is push through.
Mm,
And that's because when our wants and desire grows, so does our resistance. In many
mm,
ways, our desires and our resistance is one and the same. It's the same fabric. So when our want grows, so does our
mhm,
resistance. And our resistance growing makes our want grow even more. And that in turn makes our resistance grow even further. And very quickly, this becomes this feedback loop where now we want this thing really bad and we
mhm,
can't have it any really bad. So the reason I bring this up is because when we try to push through resistance with more motivation and more drive, all it does is make the resistance grow.
mm,
And then it takes a lot of energy to push through resistance. And we might be able to do it on day one, but the energy is going to be required to do it on day two and three and four. We might burn ourselves out and it might not be there.
yeah,
So, in these situations, what I recommend is that we try to reduce the want. And the way to do
huh,
that is not to push through, not to force it, because the forcing is just going to create more of it.
yeah,
The kind of looking at it, being aware of it, allowing it, not trying to fight it, can help reduce the resistance. But I also recommend that what people do is they sit in the feeling of the want. Because if we can sit in the pain of wanting it, not having it, and wanting to do anything to get it, can help ease some of the pain. And when we ease the pain, it reduces the want. And as I mentioned, when we reduce the want, it reduces the resistance, making it easier to do the thing.
Okay, help me with that a little bit because I'm feeling like to ease all of this is to reduce the want and to sit in the want and sit in the uncomfortableness of it. Seems like that would increase my anxiety and increase my desire to want something more if I'm sitting in the discomfort of the want.
Yeah, it seems that way. And that's why we don't usually sit in the feelings and we
Mm-hmm.
actually want to act on the feelings. And so let's say there is a strong want or strong desire, and you're trying to do whatever you can to act to realize it, but you just keep hitting the wall of resistance. If we can just like sit down, close our eyes, and allow that pain, that intensity, and that need to act, just sit in it as it's coming up. In the beginning, it's going to get more and more painful.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then once you felt it, it kind of like dissipates. And then a part of you realizes, oh, it's not that bad. It's okay. I don't need to have it right now. And then once you get to that stage, it just becomes easier to do it. Yeah.
Is it calming our nervous system around the anxiety of wanting to reach a goal so badly that the anxiety and the anticipation and the want and the drive and the desire is what is escalating the procrastination?
Well, like I said, what's escalating the procrastination is our want itself. So it's
Mhm.
kind of hard to imagine or believe that our own wants can get in the way of achieving our wants.
Yeah.
When we want something really bad, our resistance can't help but resist really bad as well. And because it's our want that's driving the resistance, and that want is really like the pain of not having it, when we can sit in it, we allow ourselves to feel the pain of it
Yeah.
instead of acting on that pain. I don't know what the psychology behind why that is, like sitting
Mhm.
in pain, especially emotional pain, makes it go away. I know that when it comes to emotions, our emotions are designed to warn and guide us. They're not
Yeah.
there to make our lives difficult and painful. It's so in because they're designed to be heard, they want to be heard. And when we
Yeah.
don't listen to them, they get louder and stronger.
Yeah.
And if we can sit in some of our feelings and just listen to what they're saying, years of issues can go away because all our emotions really wanted was to be heard.
Yeah.
So when we can sit in that want and that pain of it and just like pay attention to it, hear it, it tends to dissipate. And once
Mhm.
that dissipates, sometimes we realize we don't even want the thing. It was just this like
Hmm.
impulse or this
Yeah.
compulsion to go after it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense actually, because our emotions, once they're expressed, don't have that charge and that control over us.
Yeah,
And it is interesting because it goes against everything we've learned, like visualize it and think about it and manifest it and sit in that. And then the more you want it and the more you desire it, the more you're going to go after it. So it is like flipping the switch on that concept
yeah.
completely.
No, when it comes to resistance, you more or less have to do the exact opposite of everything that we've been told. But when we're dealing with resistance, I really do believe we have to not focus on wanting things so badly,
Yeah.
and instead of pushing through and plowing through, we try to not push things too hard, and we try to take things one day and one step at a time.
Yeah.
And I think what you had mentioned, that really works for the go-getters and A-type personalities
Hmm.
where they don't have resistance. So if a person doesn't have resistance, a lot of times they can go from thought to action to
Hmm.
realization. Very simple.
Mm.
And such people, they don't really understand people who do have resistance. They just think it's so easy.
Yeah.
And the reason it's easy is because they don't have this wall that comes up every time a decision or desire shows up. Now, for somebody who is not a go-getter A-type personality and has resistance come up, you can't use the same principles and same logic and the same tips. It just doesn't work, which is why I feel like a lot of people are like burnt out and stressed out and all of that because they've been motivated and inspired to do all these things and they're not able to do it.
Yeah.
It's because they have resistance. So every time a want or desire or decision shows up, this huge wall comes up that they have to go through.
Mm.
It's definitely a spectrum. So some people have it a lot more, and whereas some people have it less. So
Yeah. It makes me wonder if some of their internal resistance is based upon conditioning. So, an example would be somebody wanting to go and get a certain degree, right? Going to get a
right.
college degree. And maybe there'd been all this conditioning that they're supposed to do it and they're supposed to do it. But that's when they go and they dig down, their desire isn't really in that alignment. And so that's where the resistance is. Or if a boss is wanting them to do a project and it's not aligned with them on the inside, I'm wondering if some of that conditioning manifests with
Yeah.
that resistance.
Yeah, you're saying two things that are really important. One is conditioning, and one is alignment.
Mhm.
And I'll start with alignment. So there is a lot of talk these days about alignment,
Mhm.
though what is alignment really? So how I define it is alignment at its most basic fundamental level
Mhm.
is what the mind wants and how the body responds.
Yeah.
Just because our brain creates a want for something doesn't mean that our body will respond to it as much as we think or all of the time. And I could give a couple examples. One is that many people want to have fame and fortune.
Yeah.
Now, some people like the attention of others and they want to be on a pedestal, but others don't. So those who don't, that goal is out of alignment, and going
Mhm.
after it's going to be difficult and painful. And once achieved, it's likely not going to be fulfilling. Another example is some people love being in nature, like myself, and
Mhm.
other people like are people person. They like being around people.
Mhm.
Putting a person who enjoys nature in the middle of a concrete jungle around people is out of
Yeah.
alignment.
Yes.
Putting a people person on their own in the middle of nature is out of alignment,
Mhm.
right? So alignment is simply understanding, what the inside want. And if we're not aligned, it makes it difficult to go after it.
Yeah.
If the goal is out of alignment, over time it becomes difficult and then draining, and then you don't want to wake up in the morning.
Mhm.
And so alignment is important. And we don't think about alignment because society and media has created this image of success. and is having us chase it and says, if you don't have it, then you're not successful. And so a lot of people are chasing things that just aren't aligned, and it's what creates resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the other aspect of it was the
Conditioning.
conditioning. And
Yeah.
conditioning is huge. And conditioning can come down to cultural conditioning, conditioning based on our demographics and even our sex.
Mhm.
Women are going to have resistance to doing certain things just because of their sex, and same with men. And because this is a sensitive topic, I'm not going to say what is or isn't for anyone, but I'll just share my personal experience.
Mm.
So one of the things I really enjoy doing, and I do now, is social dancing. I dance salsa and bachata.
Mhm.
And when I started a few years ago, I was like, why didn't I start this sooner? And I know why, because my social conditioning
Mhm.
stigmatized dancing as a male. Even though nobody explicitly said, dancing isn't for male,
Yeah.
from the thousands of interactions on the playground, hundreds of conversations off the playground, at a certain point, my brain came to the conclusion that something was wrong about dancing as a male. Like, it pitched hobbies and sports like football and basketball and baseball
Mhm.
and building and cars, but dancing was never part of it. And so, even though dancing came up for me in my life growing up, I, you know, I never wanted to do it at that time. There was just a lot of resistance. But when I kind of got over that, I'm like, oh wow, like this was like a big thing, and males have a lot of it. Like, dancing isn't something you do.
Yeah.
And so our conditioning definitely plays a huge part in it. And I'll share another quick story.
Mhm.
Coming from Asia, my parents wouldn't accept me as their child unless I was a doctor, lawyer, or accountant.
That's super common in cultures and specifically in
Yeah,
families.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And so growing up, my brain wouldn't even toy with the idea of doing anything outside of that. So
Mhm.
in my prior life, I was actually an accountant. I was a CPA.
Mhm.
And only until I got my CPA that, I truly get the respect from my parents. But I say that because um, resistance comes up through conditioning, because we were conditioned to think that we needed to be studious and have a profession that, was respected. And it made me feel like I wouldn't be a success in life, or I would be a failure if I didn't achieve these things. And I almost needed to achieve this thing to be able to do the things that I really wanted to do, which is to write and become an author and do a lot of these creative stuff. So our conditioning definitely plays a huge role in our resistance, and alignment is also a big part of resistance as well.
Yeah. I'm thinking of so many people who get out of school and then they get a job and then they get tunneled into that job and that career. And then they later feel like it's not in alignment with them or it doesn't bring them joy, but they're tunneled into that profession and that career. And then they
Yeah,
can't figure out a way out.
yeah, and they're so deep in it. It's like I've already put so much time and effort into it,
Yeah.
and so they feel like if they get out, it'd be a waste of all those years. And then as we get older,
Mm.
another reason for resistance starts to take a hold of us, which is habit.
Hmm.
The more we do something, the more habitually ingrained that becomes. And even though we see a better way or another option or another possibility, the habit keeps us bringing us back to the old thing. So now we have to like work to break it. It's even hard to find out what it is in alignment, because there's
Yeah.
two challenges of alignment. One is habit. Majority of what we find easy and comfortable to do is because of habits.
Hmm.
We've done it enough times where it's like comfortable, and it doesn't put a strain on it. And anytime we're learning something new and different, it's uncomfortable. It feels awkward. And it's so much so that we don't even want to do it. And so it can feel like that goal or activity is out of alignment because it feels awkward. But the reality is, we just haven't built a habit for it. So we need to build a habit for something to know if it's truly out of alignment. Because if once we have a habit and we still don't enjoy it, then it's a good sign that it's out of alignment.
Yeah.
And the other challenge of alignment is that A lot of the things that we do enjoy are comfortable tend to avoid us from something bigger we should be doing.
Hmm.
Like I said, the resistance is very sneaky. A lot of times it'll keep us from doing something by making something comfortable and easy so we don't do that bigger thing. And so to really know if something's in alignment is if you built a habit for it and it's still enjoyable to do and it's not avoiding you or keeping you from something bigger that you feel like you should be doing or are called to do.
Yeah.
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 I do want to talk about a concept called a wanting mechanism. I think this would be really helpful for your
Yeah.
listeners as well as you. Do you mind if I go into it?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, when it comes to resistance, there's a part of our brain that's designed to hold us back. And there's actually a part of our brain that creates wants and desires. So we have a part that creates wants and desires and a part that holds us back.
Mm-hmm.
The part that creates wants and desires, it's completely unrestrained. It doesn't check to see if we have the time, energy, and resources to achieve the want. It simply creates wants. And it's resistance that looks at the want to see if it's safe and worth doing.
Yeah.
And this is the part that checks to see if we have the time, energy, and resources, right?
Yeah.
And both parts can get in the way. As I mentioned, our own wants can be a hindrance to getting our wants, and
Yeah.
so can resistance. The part of the brain that creates wants and desires, it's completely unrestrained. It's creating endless wants one after another. You can think of this part as a simple on-off switch that gets flipped based on certain cues.
Yeah.
It sees someone with nice shoes and it wants it. The latest iPhone comes out, it wants that as well. Someone attractive walks by and it wants that too. The
Mm-hmm.
wanting mechanism creates so many wants in a single day. No one person has the time, energy, and resources to achieve in a lifetime.
Yeah.
Even if we live multiple lives, we couldn't achieve, let alone enjoy all the wants our brain is producing.
Yeah.
That's because the wanting mechanism doesn't understand that our time, energy, and resources are limited. It simply creates wants. Nor does it check to see if our want is achievable or fulfilling. It simply creates wants.
Yeah.
Even while we're working on one want, the mechanism will create other wants to chase.
Hmm.
And so the wanting mechanism is the reason we buy stuff we don't need,
Yeah.
crave things that aren't fulfilling, and also the reason why people cheat when they're already in a relationship.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it's the reason why it's so hard to do the work and do the things that we want because this mechanism pulls us in so many directions, it's difficult to move in any one.
Hmm.
And I suspect that a lot of the resistance that you may have and our listeners may have is just because we have too many wants. It's,
Hmm.
you were talking about how you had a resistance to putting together this book for your family.
Yeah.
Well, it could simply have been there was like five other things that you wanted to do. And your brain was just kind of afraid that
Yeah.
you might not have time for the other things or
Yeah.
something important might come up you know, and you may not attend to it because you were working on this.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we can go into like deer in headlights because we just don't know what want to start with.
Hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
this is just one, aspect of the wanting mechanism.
Yeah.
There's so many challenges it creates. One of the biggest challenge I think right now in our society and culture is the overactive want. This is where the brain produces all sorts of desires all the time. It's often referred to as the shiny object syndrome, where a
Yeah.
person sees something and they want it. They hear about something, they want that too.
Yeah.
They don't have to hear or see anything, and their brain just pulls them in all sorts of directions.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of talked about some of the strong want, where we want something really, really bad. But then
Yeah.
there's other want challenges like the immediate want, where we want something right now, right away, or things aren't moving fast enough. But I
Yeah.
think what a really important want that I think a lot of us struggle with is the conflicting want. And if you want, I can share that because I think it's a really important topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it makes me think of a couple of things that you've already said is like when I go into the store with my kid and he's like, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. And I'm like,
Yes.
of course you do. He wants it all. And then it also makes me think of this immediate gratification piece in our society where we want something, we go on Amazon, we get it, it gets delivered the next day, and we've gotten used to wanting something and being
Yeah.
immediately gratified and not necessarily working for it or taking time to achieve something.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. This is really great that you brought it up. You can think of the wanting mechanism like a kid at a candy store.
Yeah.
Like they just want everything.
Yeah.
And you can think of resistance like the parent try to keeping the kid in check.
Yeah.
So this is a really good analogy because our wanting mechanism literally is just designed to create wants. It's not checking to see if the want is achievable for you, or if it'll be
Mhm.
fulfilling. All it's doing is creating the wants.
Yeah.
But something needs to keep that mechanism in check. Otherwise, we just kind of go all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's what resistance is there for. And although I make resistance sound like this big bad thing, it is there for a purpose, is to keep
Yeah.
the wanting mechanism in check. Unfortunately, resistance can go overboard and hold us back for too many things. And unfortunately, our wanting mechanism can go overboard and create so many wants. Yeah,
Yeah. 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 That's so fascinating.
yeah. But the conflicting one is a really interesting one because I think a lot of times our resistance comes up from a conflict
Mhm.
that our own brain is creating. So, as I mentioned, the part of the brain that creates wants is completely unrestrained. It's creating wants one after another. So it doesn't check to see if the want that it's created conflicts with another want. It simply creates wants.
Yeah.
So a person can have two wants that are conflicting, meaning having one requires giving up another. I'll give a couple examples of this. One is a lot of people want fame, but at the same time, privacy.
Mhm.
A lot of people want to find that special someone, but at the same time, still date. So there's a conflict there. Like having one inherently means giving up the other.
Yeah.
And when a person goes after both, they usually don't achieve either. And so it's really important for a person to pick one and let go of the other.
Mm, mhm.
And the ones that don't usually don't go deep into either or find neither fulfilling. And
Yeah.
this is a challenge because unfortunately, as soon as you pick one, your brain starts nagging you about the other, wondering what if you had the other, and even trying to pull you to the other. And as soon as you do go to the other, your brain starts nagging you about the first,
Yeah.
wondering what if you stay with the first. And so these are some real challenges that we human have when it comes to doing what we want to do, because the inherent nature of our psychology naturally creates resistance. And we want everything, but a lot of things, it's impossible to have both things, and we can get
Yeah.
caught in it.
How do we keep our wants in check? If we have a ton of wants and we recognize we have a ton of wants, how do we check that?
Okay, well, I have a really great solution. I don't think anyone's gonna like it, but this actually hits home for me. So most
Mhm.
of my life, I had an overactive wanting mechanism.
Mhm.
It's the reason I've traveled to over 100 countries. I've
Mhm.
written 12 books before ChatGPT. I've done all sorts of activities like yoga, dance, snowboarding, skydiving, and so much more. My brain was stimulated by all the different things to do.
Mhm.
And what's more is that these wants were very overpowering. They would consume my awareness so much that they would make me either forget the wants I already had and was working on, or they would make me lose interest in them. Just reading personal development could have my brain going in all sorts of directions.
Mhm.
And I realized if I wanted to get anything done, I had to figure out a way to contain or control it. And what I did is try to contain as much triggers and stimuli as possible. I cut out television, commercials, social media, YouTube, internet,
Mhm.
and even stopped reading personal development. I went as far as to even cut out people because seeing others doing and having things made me jealous and want to do and have what they had.
Mhm.
And I essentially created a bubble that contained as much stimuli as possible. And
Or as little stimuli.
yeah, well, contain as much of it. So
Oh, okay, contain it. Got it.
yeah. And like I said, this is kind of an extreme, but I
Mhm.
honestly believe for
Yeah.
somebody with an overactive wanting mechanism or
Yeah.
somebody who has really strong wants and immediate wants and they get triggered by all the things they're seeing and doing,
Mhm.
this may not only be the best solution, but the only solution.
Yeah, it
Because
sounds
our
like a dopamine detox, right? You can whatever is giving you those dopamine hits, it can be those dings on your phone or when you're going
yeah,
shopping online. It's just detoxing from that for a specified amount of time.
Exactly. That's more or less it is. It's you're kind of detoxing from all the triggers in your life that are creating these wants. And all those things for a person where their mechanism creates such strong desires and all the time and it's easy, it really helps to contain it. And that's because our wants can be really unruly.
Yeah.
And you had talked about the a little bit about the immediate wants. So how
Mm-hmm.
I describe immediate wants is that it's where somebody wants something right now, right away, and really bad. When we want something, we don't have it. And that not having creates pain. And so sometimes we want something not because it'll be enjoyable or fulfilling, but just to remove the pain it brings.
Yeah.
And this is why I recommend sometimes it helps to sit in the pain of that want, because if we can reduce the pain, we can reduce the want.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can reduce the want, it becomes one, easier to do, or we realize it's not something we really need.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Well, Kim, how can people reach you? I know that you're a coach and a speaker, and you've written 12 books and all kinds of things. So, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and how people can connect with you?
Sure. So I'm an author of 12 best-selling books in the area of mental performance and personal mastery. Mental performance being speed reading, memory, concentration, and mind mapping, and personal mastery being self-talk, visualization, and goal setting. I also have a course called Conquer Internal Resistance, and we really just scratched the surface of this topic. We talked a lot about our wants, and there's so many more tricks. So if people are interested in that, they can get my books or my courses at kamknight.com, KAMKNIGHT.com. And if anybody wants to reach me, I also do coaching. I have developed a technique that helps people go inside their head to really understand what's going on and release a lot of the patterns. And they can reach me at kamknight.com.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Cam. Thank you for your time and for your expertise and for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Connected Community Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. I can be found at www.nickyyoga.com, NICKYYYOGA.com. Until I see you again next week, I hope you have a beautiful day.